Welcome, Clancy. Thank you for being here. I'm really eager to just dive straight into learning about your journey into motherhood and what that's entailed for you. So I would love for you to start off by just sharing about your initiation into motherhood and I guess the beliefs, the hopes, the vision that you had that, yeah, impacted all that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for having me, Carla. So happy to be here. And yes, my initiation to motherhood started, my first born, he's 8.5. So we're traveling back in time to that point. And I was 33 or 32 when I conceived him. And I really wanted a natural birth. And interestingly, right at the beginning, though, we were living in Darwin at the time, so up in the Northern Territory, but all our family and I guess friend networks that we had over the course of our lives were really in New South Wales. So I booked into an obstetrician in New South Wales initially, which is just like mind-boggling. But that's what I did because a friend, had recommended this person. But the more I started to read, books like Sarah Buckley's Natural Birth, Natural Mothering, and those types of materials, the more I started to think, hang on a minute, I don't think it's going to serve me to fly back to New South Wales to have my baby, to be a convenience for everyone else, my family. And, because my friend has had this experience with this OB, which she actually ended up having a cesarean with this OB. So I quickly kind of backed out of that arrangement. I never ended up seeing that obstetrician, but it's interesting. So I haven't really thought about that for a long time, actually. And I hadn't even thought about that in thinking about what I was going to share on this podcast. So it kind of just reveals where I was at right at the beginning of that pregnancy, because we conceived so quickly after kind of setting the intention that we were going to have a baby. And so my preparation really felt like it was like my mind had to catch up with the fact my body was now pregnant, because it just happened. And we were expecting, maybe it'll take a year to conceive this baby. But no, he was just waiting and ready and came in. So it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I think because I hadn't really engaged in any preparation before that time, which is probably a common story, there are women now who are recognizing actually it's probably really helpful to start preparation for birth way back in, before you even conceive. Like it's such a big transformation, and there's so much unraveling of layers of conditioning to explore, that having just like a 9 month or less window whilst you're pregnant to start that is enormous. But anyway, that's where I was. There was a home birth service in Darwin where we were living, and I booked in with them, and my plan was to have a home birth. And I really placed a lot of trust in that system, and I had a midwife that I felt relatively connected to, and complied with all their, box ticking tests that I had to do to not be risked out, because we know that, there's a very narrow criteria for those types of things. So anyway, it rolled around to the time for me to have my baby, and I wasn't risked out, but my midwife had been away for about 8 weeks prior to my birth process starting. And she'd just gotten back from her leave that day that my birth process had started. And for whatever reason, the story from their end was, sorry, we just can't come to you at home today, so you're going to have to come to us. And there was no, there was no real reason. And I think because I was already quite deep in my process, I really didn't have the capacity to, get into this dialogue about, well, hang on a minute, I want to stay home. There's no real reason for you to be doing this. And I think there was a bit of fear on my partner's behalf. And so when that was communicated to us, like, they sent a midwife out to me at home. She said, just kind of keep doing what you're doing. I was in early labor, and come in, to the birth center when you're ready. So it threw a real spanner in the works in my psyche. But I felt helpless to do anything about it or to even speak. It was like when my birth process started, I really lost my voice right from the very beginning. Um, and I don't know if that's just because it was overwhelming, because I was also having a lot of fear come up about, this is happening now. I don't feel ready to be a mum, actually. I had this undercurrent of just not feeling quite ready. And I think that shows that there was still work that I hadn't explored. And it was really about becoming a mum and how enormous that felt, like that responsibility, and probably some mother wound stuff in there, relating to that too. And I was 39 weeks, and I just really wanted to be pregnant for a bit longer. Like, I had in my head, I had this acupuncture appointment book and kinesiology, and I really wanted to just be in that space for a little bit longer. And I had a doula, and I think also what had happened was maybe a week or two prior to my birth process starting, she'd asked me about my baby's position, and pretty much the whole time he'd been left on the left side, which, is optimal. If you go into that whole story and paradigm. And then he switched sides to the right. And when I shared that with her, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't really know about the spinning babies business. And I did kind of have a bit of a thread of knowing that the left was optimal. But she said something really benign, like, that's interesting that your baby's changed sides. The right side is not as optimal. I can't remember exactly what she said, but she implied, okay, maybe that side is not the best side. Maybe you should do a bit more movement, leaning forward. And it really planted a seed of doubt. And like I said, it was very benign. She didn't say it with any intention to make me fearful, but you're so open, and it was so late in the pregnancy. And I just really heard what she said, and it sparked some fear within me. And then I looked at this spinning babies business, and I got really worried about this positioning. And so when my waters started to leak on the morning that they did, which is how my birth process started, I was like, I'm not ready. Like, he's not in the right position. I'm scared about becoming a mum. I need another week. There was all this inner resistance bubbling up. And, I think that's okay. Like, it was perfectly okay that was happening, but it meant that my process was going to take time, because there were these layers of things that were emerging that I hadn't fully explored prior to birth. And so, I ended up transferring into the birth center around lunchtime, because it felt to me like things were picking up. My waters had started leaking the day before at about 8 a.m. I didn't get any contractions or, sensations till midnight. And I'd also lied about that to my midwife, because I knew that I would be put on the clock and there was 16 hours, and then they'd be talking about, we want to induce and you can't have your home birth now. And so I'd kind of kept that a bit secret, and I felt sneaky with that too. I felt like a bad girl. Like, there was so much mental stuff happening within me that I think really just probably didn't allow me to drop in and surrender, because of these different things that were happening. I was worried that I'd lied, and that's bad. And the midwife that they sent out to me to communicate, you'll need to come into us, actually said to me, oh, you probably shouldn't get in the birth pool, because if you do that, you might not make it into us. Like, you might accidentally have your baby at home, more or less. And so then I also was like, oh, I'm not allowed to get in the birth pool at home because I might not make it in there. And my doula said to me after she left, just get in if you want to, like, it's fine, because they were kind of setting it up, because I think I had said, I want to get in, like, I feel like I need a bit of relief. But I didn't. I maintained my good girl posture there. And it's just, so funny thinking back about all these little bits now that, they're little, but they have a big impact. And so we go into the birth center. Things were ramping up, and I wanted to get comfortable there if I was going to change where I was, the environment. So we got there and felt quite defeated and pretty disappointed that we were there. And, then the pressure was on. We want to do some BEs. We want to check where you're at. And, I pushed that away for a couple of hours and, delay, even though it was very clear that I'd said I didn't want that in my birth plan, and I'd had those discussions with them. But, they still are doing what they need to do. So eventually I agreed, and I was definitely progressing. I can't remember where I was, but, maybe 6 centimeters. At least I got in the bath there. That was great. But things just started to plateau. And I knew that the midwife that I was with, my known midwife that I'd had, would need to be finishing her shift soon, because she was only allowed to work for 12 hours. So it was like there was all this time pressure then on top of the other layers that were there. So, of course, it was just slow, and I wasn't progressing according to their timeline. And because my waters had been leaking, even though they weren't aware of the full duration, I then kind of became a bit high risk in their eyes, I suppose. And so my midwife had to finish her shift. I still hadn't had my baby. I felt like everyone was just waiting on me, including the doula, even though she certainly wasn't giving that energy. But, just having people there who are kind of waiting, I could feel that, and that also didn't help. So I got transferred up to the hospital, and things just descended into even, more unfortunate circumstances there. I had a registrar OB who was just a bully, really intimidating, very coercive, used the dead baby card, just went on and on and on. And I was fully dilated for a long time, but I hadn't been able to pee for a long time, and they'd given me IV fluids. So my bladder was just full. And I think, my perspective now is, my waters had been broken too, which again was something I agreed to after a lot of pressure. And, the old line that, well, it'll help, make this go quicker, and, we're all waiting. So you end up agreeing. And so, by this stage, I just felt so defeated. Why isn't my baby coming down? They know I'm fully dilated. Where is he? I had really bad back pain, so he turned posterior by this stage, and it was becoming pretty unbearable. And I think the OB, the registrar, said, I would like to do an ultrasound to check your baby's position. And I agreed to that. I felt like that would be a great idea, because I did feel like he was stuck. And of course he was. He was stuck because I felt so much pressure from all these external forces. I didn't feel safe, which also explains to me now why I couldn't release my bladder. Like, it's not safe to release, like maybe he was also in a funny position and that was contributing. So she did the ultrasound and said, oh, he's not in a good position. And I said, okay, what does that mean? She said, oh, probably a cesarean. And she left the room. So I mentally prepared for that then. I'm like, okay, that's where this is going. Fine. And I really accepted that. and was willing for that to be what the outcome was. So much so that when she came back, and she'd obviously spoken to her superior, like the consultant OB, he had said, no, probably in their discussion, it was decided she should be offered an epidural and Syntocin and, try and birth her baby that way. So that was what she wanted to do when she came back. And I just could not bear the thought of being in the room with her any longer because of her attitude. Like, some of the stuff she did, I don't even feel like explaining it again, but just like the nastiest person you can think of. And I later met people, other women in Darwin, who'd had encounters with her, which were also horribly traumatic, that I sat in circle with. So it wasn't isolated to me. It was her way of operating. And not that makes it any better. So where was I with the story? Oh, yeah. She came in and said, this is what we need to do. And I said, no, I want the cesarean, because I was just like, I don't want to be harassed and bullied by you any longer. Like, I want this to end. And that's, at least there's some certainty with that path, that I don't have to deal with you, because it was just, horrible dealing with her. It was obstetric violence, the way she threw her weight around and the way she was rough when she, did examinations and what she did. So they prepped me for surgery and did a catheter, and a huge amount of urine came out in that bag. No one thought maybe we should get you up now and just see if, now that there's probably a lot of space there, and we know you've been fully dilated for a long time. That didn't happen. Went off to theatre, did the spinal block, then couldn't move. The consultant was there by then. He obviously checked me first and said, your baby is too far down. You could have done this yourself. I'm going to need to do a trial with forceps. So my baby was born that way, which, in some ways, yes, a relief that it wasn't a cesarean. That was, how I then felt. But, it's an episiotomy. It's traumatic for him. He had bruises on his head. Fortunately, we didn't have any immediate separation. He came straight to me. His APGARs were very high, and that was wonderful. But I didn't have that feeling of elation when he was handed to me. I felt like I'd left my body because of the trauma, and I recognized that straight away. Like, I knew what had happened was not okay, that it didn't need to happen. I was, shaking and in shock, and it just was not pleasant. And it's very sad still thinking about that. And the first words I said to him were, I'm sorry that this was how you were born. And like, to feel like that's the first thing you say to your baby when you meet them is just, I didn't think I'd get emotional thinking about that again, but it's,
How were you supported in the wake of that experience? What was your beginning to, motherhood like?
Yeah, I was not prepared. So we had moved from Kakadu. We'd been living out there for 3 years, which was a very remote community and a beautiful place to be. But we'd moved into Darwin not long before my son was born. So I hadn't had an opportunity to make new friends and community, and our family were all down here. And I'd spent so much of my energy focusing on preparing for birth that I had just completely not acknowledged the postpartum. I hadn't done any meal preparation, nothing. And Tom was had started a new job. So he only had 2 weeks off. And the first week was really consumed by the birth, because it did take a couple of days. And then I was in hospital for a couple of days after. So it was really rough. It was a rough initiation, because I also was very acutely aware of the trauma and felt traumatized. And because of the injuries to my pelvis that happened with having a bladder so full for a long time, with a baby on top of it, having lots of vaginal examinations, having an episiotomy, having forceps, I was incontinent for a while after that, which was another distressing layer of my body is completely broken from this. And after 3 weeks, my baby became colicky, again, doing the air quotes, because, that clearly now was birth trauma. And he'd also been given antibiotics because they'd pushed and pushed and pushed, even though I'd tried to stop that from happening, and I'd agreed to have them myself, trying to strategically think, okay, well, if I agree to have them, they won't pressure me to give them to him, but they did. And, they pull out all the stops, like, we're going to send in the head of the hospital if you don't agree to this. And it was just prophylactic antibiotics, and he didn't need them. And so
antibiotics because the amount of time your waters had been open for, or
yeah. Even with me kind of not disclosing the full time. So he was colicky, and yes, maybe it was some of that gut disturbance from having all that in his system, because it's IV antibiotics for 48 hours. It's crazy. And just the trauma. And also I was completely untethered and dysregulated from it as well. And we know that babies regulate from their mother. So we were just in this loop. He would scream for hours on end, day and night, for long blocks of time. And that didn't stop at the 3-month mark, where often the colicky business stops. It improved, but probably for the first year of his life, he was an extremely upset baby at times. And I think it was just him really processing all that had happened, and releasing so much of that trauma. So it was rough, because, that was hard, having no support around and not understanding, like, just the huge change that was going to take place becoming a mother, and not really feeling ready for it. So, and we just culturally don't understand that, I think, because of how we're living in these separate nuclear families, and we're not seeing babies being cared for by their mothers in community. And so it was a shock, a huge shock. Breastfeeding fortunately went very well, and so that was at least one thing that was connecting and healing for us. And we co-slept. That just felt right. The cot never got used. He hated it, and he was just a Velcro baby. But that was hard to adjust to as well, because I didn't realize. I think I read the continuum concept maybe when he was 5 months old, and some of that really started to make sense to me. So it was a difficult time, and I started to do a lot of work to unravel that story pretty early on.
What did that look like? Because it's interesting that you said that you recognized you had birth trauma straight away. It isn't the case for a lot of people. They think that what they went through, well, that's, it wasn't how I wanted it to go, but that's just birth, right? Like that's, it's just how it is. Who am I to complain? I just need to be grateful and get on with life. But to know that what you went through wasn't okay, and that it was trauma. Were you able to voice that to anybody? Were you, seeking out support surrounding your healing journey, or was this a very lonely time for you in that regard?
Fortunately, the doula I had, and I think the recognition early on was because I had educated myself very well on what normal birth should be like. And my doula had also done, a great job of preparing me. And she'd been very open with me actually about the chances of not having a home birth, even though you're in the system. Like, she was very transparent because she'd supported a lot of women who'd, had the rug pulled out from underneath them due to being risked out or, whatever. So, and she had supported a couple of women who'd free birthed, and that just wasn't really on my radar. I just thought that's something that only a certain type of woman does, like a unicorn woman. And I just didn't feel ready for that. That's just not where I was at that time. And I had this belief that midwives keep birth safe. And what if something went wrong? Like if I just stayed home? And I really wasn't ready to take that responsibility piece fully. I was still outsourcing that to a system with misaligned values, really. And yeah, so I think I recognized it early because of her support and guidance. And, afterwards she also, agreed that that wasn't okay, what happened. And she was very supportive in helping me to debrief after. And we became good friends, actually. And so her support was really pivotal in helping me unwrap a lot of what happened. And I sought out some mentoring in a long sort of container with Angela Fitzgerald, who I can't quite remember what the name of her business was, but I think it was Birth Your Truth or something. She'd been a midwife who'd left the system, and that was her focus in mentoring, was birth trauma. So I did a couple of 6-month containers with her, I think, where we really, had that intimate connection. She was wonderful at just holding space for all the layers and drawing threads of connection between what had happened in my birth and my earlier life experiences. I think that's can be really important when you are ready to start to explore your story and excavate it and make connections between what happened to me here and my earlier life, and how did my patterning and my imprinting and my conditioning, particularly before the age of 7, how did that influence what might have happened in my birth? And drawing those connections helped me to take some responsibility and take some of that power back and see how some of the choices I'd made had led to what had happened, and not in a way where I was blaming myself, because yes, it's nuanced. It's like, yes, I was a victim of that system, and I can also not stay in victimhood about it and be a victim of my story and change how I'm relating to my story and take that forward into any future experience. So I think that's what I did slowly. And then I conceived again when my son was about 2. And it's funny, that kind of prompted me to say to my partner, I don't want to live up here anymore. We're too far away from family. This next baby, I want to be closer to, I want to go back to New South Wales, basically. And I want to, have a home birth with a midwife. So I was still had this belief that I needed a midwife, but it was going to be a private midwife this time. That was so. We started making plans to move back down to New South Wales. I reached out to a midwife in the area down there, and then at 12 weeks I started bleeding and spotting, and a week later had an early birth and lost that pregnancy and that baby. And whilst that was upsetting at the time, it was also healing in its own right, because I stayed home and released that pregnancy at home. And it was another thread of just taking back some of that power that I'd handed over in my son's birth. And yeah, we moved back home after that. So even though we lost that pregnancy 4 or 5 months later, we were back in New South Wales, and we've been here in the same house ever since, in the Hunter Valley, on a property that belongs to my partner's family. And we then went on a very long conception journey to conceive again, because with my son, it just happened straight away. And then with the pregnancy we lost early, it also happened straight away, when we sort of vaguely started speaking about having another child. So there was a little bit of an expectation that this will just happen again. And it didn't. It took nearly 4 years to conceive again. And it was a huge timeline of lots of different things, and tending to my health, which had been impacted, I think, more than I recognized, by my son's birth and by postpartum depletion and not looking after myself properly. All those things kind of came to a head in the form of thyroid problems and just being quite depleted and undernourished, and really just not as simple as eating enough. Not really understanding how much nutrition and calories I needed to be eating to just be fertile. And, you know, even engaging in fasting and things like that, because I was under some assumption that was healthy. So just doing things that were not helpful, whilst also doing other things that were helpful, like acupuncture. And then my cycle became very problematic. I had very heavy periods, lots of flooding, lots of pain, really just problematic, like debilitating cycle, which I'd never really had before. So again, you know, this is my body speaking to me that there's things that need to be looked at here. And that took me on a big journey of having some womb work and Chini Sang massage, and really tending to the space with body work, with lots of different incredible professionals, and clearing what had become, like, there was a stagnancy there, I guess, which was causing really awful pain and heavy bleeding, and possibly some endometriosis, which I never ended up having surgery to get the diagnosis for. I had booked twice and pulled out because, I just was following my intuition, I guess. And the reason I had booked it in was because I thought, well, this might be the thing, though, that will help me have a baby finally. You know, you hear these stories of women who do have surgery for endometriosis and the cycle after they finally conceive. And so, I was booking it in for that reason. But then just when I tuned back into myself and my body, it was like, no, actually, this isn't the right path. And with all the work I did and the body work and the abdominal massage, things did start to improve, the yoni steaming, all these things, changes to my nutrition, and just coming to a place of peace, I guess, with the possibility that maybe I wouldn't have another child. And that was sort of where it was getting to with how I was feeling in my inner world about it, even though at times I'd been desperate about, you know, having another baby. And my 39th birthday was coming up, and I saw this vision quest was happening on over my birthday, the last day of it. So you go out into nature on your own for 4 days and 4 nights, fasting, just with water. No, nothing, no watches, no books, no writing, no, nothing, no phones, no food, not even a pillow. You're sleeping on the earth. You don't have a tent. Ideally, you have a tarp as a shelter, and you pack that up every day and you sit in nature, and you are entering ceremony and prayer. And so I saw that the last day of the 4 days of that quest would be my 39th birthday. And I thought, I need to be there. This is what I need to do for me. I need to sit with myself and call this baby in, or make peace with entering my 40s next year, maybe just being a mum of one. And so I went on that vision quest, and a lot of healing took place in that container. It was such a challenge, but I said to myself, if I can do this one hard thing, be on my own for 4 days and 4 nights alone, I can do anything. I can free birth. I can do anything. And I had a big fear going into that I would tap out early, that I would want to be rescued from the experience, because I was also a forceps baby. So I had been rescued from my own birth experience and not being able to complete my own birth myself, which is then what replicated in my first birth with my son and his forceps delivery. So, it was really about the thing that came through on the first day of being in that quest was letting go of that story that I can't do hard things, that I actually can do hard things and I don't need to be rescued. And letting go of my own birth imprint about needing to be rescued. So committing just to do the 4 days and 4 nights was a commitment to letting go of that story and that imprint. And so to get to the end of the 4 days and 4 nights, it was really challenging, but I did it. And there was a lot to integrate from that experience, and a lot of other healing that came up. And I channeled a song for my daughter, who I ended up conceiving about 2 weeks after the vision quest. Wow. After nearly 4 years of not conceiving. Yeah. So I really called this next baby in, and the trees that were around me, because you stay in your 3 meter by 3 meter area. Yeah, you don't wander around the bush. You sit. It's like a sit spot. So these trees became my friends that were in this place, and each one represented, there was one that was Tom and one that was Louie, my son, and there was this other young little sapling, and that was this new baby. And so it was just ritual and devotion daily to that spot, that space, that land, and to this prayer that I had to call this baby in. And I sometimes still sing that song to her with my drum. Wow. I sang that a lot over some of the time. And so, she dropped in 2 weeks later, and I really do feel like that was the final piece of the puzzle for me. And, not saying that everyone needs to go on a vision quest to finally conceive a baby, but because I think every fertility journey, if there is hurdles and difficulties, is so unique as to what it is that woman or that couple need to do. So I was elated until I got to week 12. I was quite anxious that maybe I would lose this baby again, but she stayed, and it was a wild pregnancy, because that's just what felt really true and right for me to do, to keep returning to my inner knowing and my intuition. And yes, it definitely wobbled at times, because I didn't feel movements until quite late. I can't remember when exactly, but maybe like week 18 or something. And I think that's probably because my placentas tend to position on the anterior wall, so you're not feeling as much. So until I really felt her moving, it was a big like journey and surrender into just the unknown. And lots of times I, was grappling with, I just want to go and get a scan, I just want to know. But I would always come back to, well, yes, the scan might give me that certainty in that moment that things are okay, but beyond that, anything can happen. Like I can leave and come home and it could change. So I actually just know that I need to sit with just being in this unknown, and that is actually my preparation for her birth as well. I didn't know she was a she, but I did have a strong sense that it was a girl. So yeah, and I think there was that knowing too that I needed to just be with the unknown, and that was part of my preparing for her birth journey and that dance that we were to do together as well. And I got very sick towards the end of her pregnancy. It was 2022, and I think we'd all come out of lockdown, and there's all these gnarly things circulating, and I was really sick towards the end, and I'd had COVID as well about a month before. So I was resting a lot, and I could do that because my son was 6, and I didn't have little baby or toddler to attend to. So I was resting and asking her to wait because I'm too sick for you to come now. I'm coughing so much and this just wouldn't be pleasant. But I got to 39 plus 5, and I had a bit of a bloody show at dinner time, and I said to my partner, it's this week's away, don't worry, we've got ages. It's just I'm probably going to spot for a week and then it'll finally happen. I've asked her not to come until I'm feeling better, so don't panic, go to bed. I went to bed coughing and sitting up, and I was just not well. And I think I was in bed for about 90 minutes and started to have a couple of very mild sensations. And then all of a sudden it was not mild anymore. After just 2, it was like, get up, this is happening, and it's on. And so it was just intense from the get-go. I feel like it was just active labor from the beginning. My partner woke up and came into the bedroom maybe at around midnight, and I was moaning a bit and standing up. He said, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine, go back to bed. I'll tell you when I need you." I was in a bit of denial, I think. I thought this will be a long time. Maybe an hour later, I'd gone into the shower and I was on the ground and I just wanted water on my back. I wanted some warmth on my body for some relief from the intensity. And I woke him up again, and he came in and he's like, "I think I might set the pool up because that wasn't set up." I'm like, yes, set that up. I want that now, actually. So he's then racing around, setting that up. My son woke up and was quite scared just by the noises I was making. And I tried to comfort him, but wasn't very good at doing that because I just really had to deal with what was happening and just being so thrust into birth and the intensity of it. So he was a little bit lonely, I think, whilst Tom was setting things up and I was really in my process. And when the pool had maybe this much water in it, I dived in, and about 90 minutes later, she was born. So it was only, like a 4-hour process, really, from when it kicked off to her emergence, which was at about 4 a.m. And it was just, I felt so connected to her. I had none of that resistance that I did with my son, where I was feeling fear about becoming a mother for the first time, because obviously I guess I'm already a mother, and this pregnancy was so long awaited. It was really, I was so ready which was so different to that first time. So there was no resistance. I was so open and willing to just surrender. And I think that was probably why it was so fast. And even though I was so sick, and in some ways I feel like I coughed her out, it just showed me how incredibly powerful and resilient physiological birth is. Even when I was the sickest I've ever been, I just gave birth, like just so normally and quickly, just like any other day, really. It was just kind of boring, beautifully boring, and so incredibly healing and redemptive and triumphant. And then discovering that it was a girl, because I didn't know for sure, was just, that nothing beats that, that feeling of love that, just was so overwhelming, and it was just magic.
Yeah.
The placenta took another 3.5 hours. I think I was just so spent from that with my sickness that was also happening, the healing process I was in, that I kind of left the job a bit unfinished. So it wasn't that I forgot I had to do that. I just really needed a rest and got a bit complacent and went to lay down and have a rest, which was perfect. I don't think that was wrong, but the afterbirth pains were pretty brutal. And it got to a point about 3 hours later where I was like, I'm not really fully resting because this is really painful. I need to get the placenta out. And I don't want to have to transfer because of a retained placenta. Like, that is not happening. So I rang a dear friend who's a birth keeper. I needed a pep talk. I needed some morale and, a wise woman. And so fortunately I was able to call her, and it was like 7:30 in the morning. She gave me my pep talk, and even though I'd wanted to do a lotus birth and burn the cord, and I was like, no, just like throwing that plan out the window. We're cutting the cord. I'm going into the shower on my own, and I'm birthing this placenta. It's happening. So that happened.
What was the pep talk? Do you recall?
Yeah, I do. So I think basically I just needed to say to her what I just said to you, which was, I don't want to go to hospital. I don't want to transfer. Like, I need to do this. And she's like, yes, you do. And you will. You need to get into the shower, squat down, bear down. It's probably just sitting there already. Gentle cord traction. You know how much force to apply. You'll feel it. But bear down whilst you're squatting and pulling forward with the cord. So she gave me like some specific tips, and it was out pretty quickly with all that, and just being on my own, I think, and having that really set intention that this is happening now and I'm ready now for this to be complete.
How did Louie end up coping with the birth? So he was a bit upset when his dad was busy trying to prepare the pool, and his mum was, deep in it and unavailable to him. So how did the rest of his experience kind of play out?
Louie, yeah. So he stayed in his room pretty much for the whole birth. He didn't come out to witness his sister being born, which I guess I have my own sad, disappointed feelings about, but that's what was right for him. So I totally honor and respect that. And on the video after she was born, not long after, I say, where's Louie? And, I want him out here. And so he came out, and he met her then, and he was there in the immediate aftermath. So that was really nice. And he's okay. Look, I don't think he was traumatized by it, but he just found it difficult to see me dealing with that intensity. And he is a very sensitive boy, so it's just a lot for him to process, even though, he has always been exposed to birth because I was, attending births and would talk to him about it and often show him videos of births. But yeah, still, I guess when it's your own mum, yeah, he just didn't want to necessarily be right there.
Yeah. So that brings up a question for me then, Clancy. During this 6-month period of between Louie's birth and you conceiving Opal, were you working in a birth worker role during that time?
Yeah, so when Louie was about 9 months old, I'd had this feeling during his pregnancy that maybe I was feeling like I wanted to be a doula after this baby, but I kind of just pushed it to the back of my mind and thought it's probably just a phase because I'm pregnant and I'm having a baby, that I'm really interested in this birth stuff. And once I've had him, I'm sure it'll go away. But it didn't. And when he was 9 months old, it was still really strong, this desire to just be involved in birth somehow. I started looking for a doula training to do. And when I think he was 14 months old, we all travelled to Byron Bay and I did a 4-day doula training with Anna Watts, her celebration of birth, 4-day immersion. So that was my introduction to birth work. And I had a friend who invited me to support her for her second baby a few months after that. And then I had a couple of other friends invite me to their births. So I started attending births, when he was close to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
And that sort of makes more sense for me as well. I was going to ask the question about, it's quite something to go from the birth experience that you had with Louie and then through that massive journey that you went on around your own kind of holistic health, I guess, to come to a place where when you did conceive, it was like, and I'm having a wild pregnancy and free birth, it's like, oh, okay. So
How does that happen?
yeah.
Totally.
I was going to ask how you'd gotten to that place, but of course, if you'd been entrenched in the world of birth, you were fast learning about why your first birth was traumatic like it was, and how avoidable that actually is if we just understand how the system is designed to work and how our physiology is designed to work and how the two clash in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, so I definitely had a lot of continuing deep learning happening through the women I was supporting about the system and about birth, and even more trauma, unfortunately, through supporting some women in their own births in the system, which is just sad to reflect on. But it really started to shift my perspective and that belief that I referred to earlier, where I kind of was still sitting in this space of midwives keep birth safe. And that was a big belief that I guess began to slowly fray once I attended more and more births in the system, where actually, because of how the system requires midwives to operate within it, they often don't keep birth safe. Their role often interferes with the physiology because of what they need to do to tick their boxes and do their things. And there's also a lot of fear, I think, within unchecked fear in midwives in the system, because maybe they haven't done their own healing work, even around their own birth imprints. And, so many of us are walking around with birth trauma from our own births. I mean, like we've all been birthed at some point. We're all here. And so, that belief about midwives and safety really just completely unraveled. And that's how I got to this place with my daughter, where I knew I wouldn't be engaging with the system or hiring a midwife. And in 2020, so that was 2 years before she was born, I declared on my social media page, I won't be attending births in the system anymore, because I can't continue to, I guess, be complicit in what the harms of that system. And I can't stand by and be in that space. It's too heartbreaking. And, you know, I guess I do applaud doulas who continue to be able to staunchly enter that space and advocate. And that's just not me, though. No, I'm just not cut out for that. That's a hard gig. It's a really hard gig. There's so many forces and power dynamics that you're up against, and I just couldn't do that anymore. So I started attending births outside the system then, and I also was opposed to even attending births with home birth midwives, because I'd had a couple of those, and again, you know, just what was happening in the home just didn't sit right with me. And
Can you give a couple of examples? Because
yeah.
if they are working outside of the system, if they are independent private midwives, typically they don't have the box tick stuff. So what is it what that you were witnessing, and what do you believe were the reasons why those things were taking place?
Yes. Well, actually, I never worked with any private midwives as a doula. So it was still, there was a home birth service here where we live in New South Wales as well. And so I worked with the last birth I attended with that service. It was a first time mum, and she was progressing and doing beautifully. But because they had done a VE and discovered that she was 10 centimeters, she was then on the clock. I think it's 90 minutes to have your baby. Now we know that you've got 90 minutes. And of course, the 90 minutes came and went. And without much real discussion, they called an ambulance on her and had, you know, them sitting there waiting to transfer her. And she, by that stage, when they arrived, had started to push, and her baby was going to be born soon, hopefully. And so it was just the way that was handled, and the lack of discussion and consent and some other things that happened thereafter. I thought, oh, yeah, I can't do that either. That's just, can't be in that space. It's not in integrity for me to be there. And I can't do much about it at the time, because they're doing their job, even though I just don't agree with that protocol. So yeah, it was just a cutting of any sort of home births, even with the system, or independent midwives as well, because I think, you know, I'd heard stories still about that area where things still happen that wouldn't have been okay with me.
And I wonder if that's because of what you were talking about earlier, which is that these midwives who are practicing outside of the system but are still disturbing birth, are still interfering with physiology, and whether that is from their own, as you described, unhealed traumas. And you know, if they maybe came to the place of being a private midwife or a midwife outside the system through having been in the system for some time and realizing it's not okay for them. Got a lot of healing to do if we have been part of that system of birth for some time, and we take on board a lot of fears when we are witnessing all of the traumas that are taking place within that system, especially if we haven't had the opportunity or the lessons to learn around how it's actually the interference, the intervening, the fact that women are going into the system of the hospital that causes the need for further interventions, right, that causes birth to become unsafe, and then suddenly that cesarean is required because the baby has become distressed, because the mother hasn't received the support she needed and has been distressed or in labor for ages because her body, like yours, didn't want to open up and release because you're safe to do so. So if you haven't kind of unpacked and understood how common interventions can impact physiology, how fear impacts physiology, how lack of good support impacts physiology, then you can be none the wiser and bring that all into the home birth space. Yeah, and I see this a lot I run training courses around what I call healing birth practitioner training, so training others in the art and science of holistic birth trauma support, so essentially to do the work that I do. And I get a lot of midwives and doulas coming on that course, and so many midwives are learning so much on this course that it's like, this should be the stuff you're learning, and
this is the foundation.
it's right.
Yes.
Yeah, if midwives are, the role of the midwife is to protect and support physiology, to protect normal birth, to be with women, then this is the basics. This is the essentials, is understanding how physiology works and what things negatively impact upon it,
Absolutely.
and yeah, so it blows me away
That they're blown away by that, because you see it as so fundamental, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like you said, that should be like the basis. Like if they've got that, there's really not much for them to do in most circumstances.
Yes, that's right.
Except sit on their hands and
and I think a lot of it, I think the doing is during the pregnancy and the relationship with the woman, and
that's right.
helping her to unpack her beliefs or fears or conditioning, like you talked about earlier on as well. I mean, that's the work of birth preparation. And there is much to do when it comes to birth, because your body's just going to do what it's designed to do because you feel safe to surrender. And the midwife is able to knit in the corner or sit on her hand.
Yeah, and that really was shown to me, I guess, through the birth of my daughter, where it was just so fast and straightforward and just like nothing to it really, even though it was intense and full on when it was happening. It's like, because all that inner work and all that resistance that I'd had with my first wasn't there anymore. It's like the physiology just takes over, even though my body was depleted from being so sick. It doesn't matter. And one of my mantras before that birth was, this is crazy, but it was, even unconscious women can give birth, because I was so sick and I was quite worried about, will I have the energy to give birth, like being this unwell? How will I do it? And that's why I was sort of in conversation with her, like, I think you should wait, and I'm not very well at the moment. I think she was sick of the coughing, like just the shaking around in there, because my muscles were sore from coughing so much. And it was just, she knew her timing, and my body also, intelligently probably thought, no, this baby should be born now. Like, yeah. And
look at the beautiful lesson that it's offered you, is this true, now very embodied understanding that yes, you can give birth even under those sort of health challenging sort of times. And, that's how amazing our physiology is, and that's quite a potent lesson to have when you're in a role as doula as well as mother.
I really took that lesson from the Vision Quest. I can do hard things. Had to make it really hard for myself and be really unwell. And and really drive that home that, like, I can do anything, because, like, I just did that. My body did that so beautifully, even though I was so unwell. Like, that fetal ejection reflex, I did do a little bit of pushing, but my body did everything. It was so involuntary, and I just had to allow that to move through me. And yeah.
Wow.
And even, continuing to be so unwell into my postpartum with her, because I was still coughing for another couple of weeks afterwards, it just still didn't detract from just the high of just doing that, and not having my physiology and those hormones interfered with any drugs or trauma. And it was just, riding this beautiful psychedelic oxytocin high into that postpartum. And I'd prepared for that so well compared to my first. The freezer was stocked, my partner was having 6 weeks off, I had community around, I had a meal train, our family are around. It was just a vastly different experience, and again, very healing, because we know that you can heal chronic health conditions in that first 40 days, 40 days for 40 years, if you are properly nourished. And I was in bed for a month with my legs together because I did have a significant tear. It wasn't 3rd degree, but it was a bad 2nd degree tear from where the episiotomy scar was, I believe, because it's on the same line and side, which was the right side where it was cut. So that ripped open, and for a few days I didn't think I'd torn it all. That's how, like, I didn't feel anything. The hormones were so high that I wasn't in pain, even though there was this big tear. And I finally sort of had a proper look a few days later. I was like, oh, actually, that's not looking too crash hot. But I know all I need to do is what I'm already doing, which is stay in bed, keep my legs together, keep this area clean. I'm not even going to bother with the seaweed and the manuka and the, whatever. My body knows what to do. This part of my body is designed to heal, and it will heal if I give it the time and the space. And there were a few wobbles through that sort of 6-week period where I was like, oh, is it healing? And, I was kind of searching for some stories of women who had healed similar tears, which I found in a couple of online communities, and just had to trust, really, that, I was doing everything I could to heal, and it did heal, and it was so much less painful than being stitched up. And I mean, I probably could have called a midwife and maybe had some stitches, but that didn't feel necessary.
Well, and you didn't know at the time, and I think it is quite a short.
It's time sensitive. That's right. Yeah, that's true too. So that window had passed.
Wow. Yeah, and just reflecting on what you'd said earlier about when you met your first baby, your boy, and you said you were really dissociated, that you were really disconnected from the experience. How different that vibe, imagery, feeling is compared to what you're describing, even though you're really sick. Meeting your girl on your terms, and without any disturbance. It sounds dreamy. You're sick as a dog and it sounds dreamy.
It's still amazing. And I think that what I was just thinking when you were saying that was, when he was born and handed to me and I said, I'm sorry to him, I had so much guilt already that I hadn't fulfilled my first, task for him as a mother, to birth him in peace and safety. I knew that type of birth would have been a shock for his system as well. And so immediately I had all this guilt and, a bit of shame, but mostly guilt. And I just, that just wasn't even part of the equation the second time around. And just to feel guilty as your son is born is a big, big thing to have.
You still hold on to guilt around that experience? And if not, what has enabled you to shift that?
Oh, I think there's still definitely, there's still some threads of that there. And I don't know if it'll ever go away completely, or I guess, just finding a softness and compassion with myself. And probably time has done that. And I think my two recent births, so the birth of my daughter and my son, through those journeys, I've become the mother that I, want to be most of the time. We all have our moments, but, and a lot of that has been like just not expecting myself to be perfect, that I'm a good enough mother, and they're here because of that, and they chose me. So
Yeah. Yes, I just thinking around, because I hear this a lot from the women who I work with, this guilt piece around why the baby came into the world. And I really believe that as we do the work on ourselves to heal from our experience, and especially if we invite our baby or our child into that journey. So sharing a different story of birth with your son, you said you show him videos and this and that, and then of course, he learned first, well, not firsthand, but through the births of his two siblings, which were both free births, that okay, I'm sure that at some sort of cellular level there is a healing for him in your healing. I talk about a tool that I suggest to women who I work with, to write a letter to their baby and to share with their baby what their hopes and vision have been for their birth and start to life, their grief at how things unfolded, and then their hopes for their relationship with their baby looking forwards from here. And I suggest to them, if they feel comfortable to do so, to share the letter with their baby, to read it to their baby. And obviously their baby's not going to understand the words. Or if they're at an age where they could understand the words, then I'm like, maybe just read it to them in their sleep, or don't even say the words, but, just feel the letter, read the letter in your mind whilst you're lying with them or something like that, because it's about this energetic exchange that's taking place. It's about inviting our child into the emotional expression of the grief we feel, which is seated in love, right? So it's a loving expression that you're offering when you share in the grief of that birth experience with your child. And I personally believe that is surely healing these babies as well. And sometimes I think we unfortunately need to have these difficult or even traumatic experiences in order to learn the lessons we need to learn to be able to find what we need to have the birth experiences that we're designed to have, and to to offer a different story for our children.
Definitely. I believe that too.
So you have a third baby as well?
Yes.
Was she
he
planned, or
no, he's a beautiful surprise. And so when I was 9 months postpartum with my daughter, we conceived him, and just it was a beautiful, shocking surprise. And it took me probably the first trimester to just wrap my head around that, because after my daughter was born, we had felt like, okay, we're done, and we're both 40, and going back to the beginning might be a bit hard, and we had a long conception journey, and we just felt like that was the end. But of course, his little spirit dropped in, and I always used to say that I wanted 3 children years ago. So I think, yeah, somewhere on some level, we probably both were open. Well, at least I was, to another baby, and he sensed that and needed to be here, and so happy that he's here. And it was more or less a wild pregnancy, although I did we call it the NIPT testing here in Australia. I don't know if it's the same there. Genetic testing and testing to determine or find out the sex via a blood test. So I wanted to know if this was a boy or a girl because I couldn't handle another surprise. So that was, and I sort of did want to have some reassurance about the chromosomal aspect too, even though I knew I was potentially opening a whole can of worms, and that it's not always as accurate as it's portrayed to be. Like, I went into the Chinese studies and everything, but I think I kind of knew deep down this baby's okay, and this is just going to verify that, and it's going to tell me if it's a boy or a girl. And I really want to know that. And initially, just tuning into my own senses at the start of the pregnancy, I thought that he was a girl. And then not long before the test, something really shifted. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is a boy. And the test just verified what I already knew on both accounts. So that was kind of nice. And just, I chose to engage in that for my own reasons. And then I chose to not engage in anything else. And he was born at 40 weeks plus 5. So he was the longest I'd ever been pregnant for. And I just felt so big and uncomfortable. And it was summertime here. And he was actually due, like his 40 weeks mark was my son's birthday, the 3rd of February. So it really felt full circle that 8 years later, this third baby was going to, maybe have his birthday on my son's birthday. And boys have 8-year cycles, and it felt significant for Louie, this little boy coming through as another aspect of his healing, which we just talked about. So, it was all quite interesting how that was lining up. And he was born 5 days after Louie's birth, though. So, yeah, again, it was just another pretty straightforward, beautifully boring birth, a little bit longer than his sister, maybe 5 or 6 hours. So the early part of labor was a bit longer. I had a bit more time to kind of warm up to it, unlike hers, which was just like coming through, freight train. So that was nice to have that little bit of warm up, and that actually gave Louie time to say, I don't want to be here. And we called his grandmother, and she came and picked him up, and that was at about 6 a.m. And his brother River was born at 9 a.m. Opal was here watching, so she saw everything, which
she would have been 18 months.
Yeah, 18 months. Yeah. So she's just sitting on the sidelines, like not scared, a little bit like, oh, this is really big. She wasn't close to me. She was, just sitting back. And I had a friend arrive in the last 10 minutes just to help, because Tom was very much with Opal. And that was fine, but I really needed a woman in the space this time, actually. And it was just our family last time, so Tom and Louie. But I was sort of complaining a fair bit to Tom in this labor, and he was like, you'll be okay. And then, distracted with Opal. And I really was craving some validation because it was really hard. And my friend arrived in perfect timing about 10 minutes before he was born, and she walked in and I was in the bedroom standing up. It was so much pressure, and I just said to her, I don't want to do this, it's so hard. And I was fantasizing actually in this birth, which was different to my previous one, about leaving and going and getting an epidural. Like, I don't want to do this again. Like, I just was like, make this end, please. Which, even though the intensity was probably the same as with the birth that was 18 months before, it just, I just didn't want to do it again. And once I said that to her, and she just placed a hand on my back and said, I know it's really hard, my waters just went
Yes.
all over her feet. It was just that moment of relief, or someone has really seen me and gets it. Because I was at her daughter's third pre-birth. She was previously a client that has since become a really dear friend. And she was pregnant with her fourth baby actually at the time. And just having her energy there, witnessing me, I just could let go. I ran to the pool. I didn't run. I needed help to amble to the pool and dive in again. And again, it was only filled this much. And he was born 10 minutes later.
Wow.
And it was just, perfect. And the placenta came a lot quicker this time, maybe an hour, I think, after he was born. And
any tear?
A little tear again. Yeah. So again, just the same protocol with that, and it has healed wonderfully. Things just look a bit different there, I guess. And it's all good. I mean, I am conscious that there can still be scar tissue with tearing, and so I'll be doing some things to tend to that with castor oil and some hands-on work. But otherwise, it was just another perfect, magical, ordinary, extraordinary day when this third little soul joined our family, and now we really do feel complete. However, I have been feeling another baby spirit hovering.
Right?
How does there's feel about it? I think we both are very much a no, very wanting to close that portal. But he did have a dream that there was another baby. So this spirit is definitely there, I think, and he's feeling it through the dream he had, and I'm sensing them there. But I've said, I'm sorry, you have to find another mummy. I know. So who knows?
We'll see.
Yeah. But that's my story, I think.
So beautiful. What a gift, sharing that with us. Thank you. I know.
Thank you for having me. It's been beautiful to travel back in time and reflect.
I've been so looking forward to this story, Clancy. I've followed your work on Instagram for a while, and you seem really aligned to the sort of the work that I do and the beliefs I hold around birth. And so when you said you were keen to come on the podcast but not yet and not ready for a while, I was like, oh my gosh, amazing. Yes, whenever you are ready, I'm here and eager to listen. And so thank you for that gift. And are you intending on getting back into your doula work? And you also do sort of birth trauma healing work as well? Yeah, can you tell us about what your offerings are and how people can work with you? Yeah,
sure. Yeah, at the moment I am taking just very limited one-on-one women who are planning a sovereign birth. And I guess my the women that I really speak to are probably the women who have had an experience in the system that they haven't felt was what they wanted, and that they are healing from and are now seeking something different. Women just like myself generally are the women that are drawn to me, although I've absolutely mentored other women who, for their first time, are planning a beautiful sovereign family birth. And I just love having this deep container of intimacy with women who are on that path. So I don't at the moment offer just one-off sessions. That may be something I come back to in the future, but I just really love to go deep with women and walk with them through the continuum of their pregnancy and through to postpartum. So I think there's some information about that on my Instagram. My website is currently under renovation. I've taken that down not too long ago. It just felt like there was some shifts that needed to happen in that space. And the Spiral is a birth healing journey that I was previously offering and do intend to offer at some point in the near future too. So if people jump on my email list or follow me on Instagram, they'll hear about that when it returns again. And that's a combination of some one-on-one work and group work. So story medicine work, working with our birth stories that we want to process and learn from and integrate and mine the gold from, I guess, and the lessons that have typically been difficult at the time or even traumatic, or even our own birth, that our own entry to the world, which it's all connected. So that's a beautiful journey that should be coming up again sometime soon. Can't say when exactly. I'm so in the depths of mothering these beautiful babies.
Yeah. So your one-on-one work you do, this doula work, that's always in person?
It can be if people are local to me, but at the moment, the women I'm working with are actually online. And the women I was working with before my son was born were all online too, and quite a few women in the States, in America. So you can be anywhere in the world.
Same with the Spiral work?
Yes, online. Yeah. So I'm not offering any in-person birth attendance at the moment. It's just too tricky being on the call with little people. I just can't do that right now. But maybe in the future I will return to that. But that's going to be some years down the track, I'd say. Just to honour this season of being there for my own family, how they need. Yeah.
And your Women Craft Way on Instagram.
Yes.
I'll link in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank
you. It's been beautiful to sit with you and have this very expansive chat and reflection.